It was a bright, sunny afternoon in New York City, the streets bustling with people going about their daily routines. In the heart of the city, there was a grand, towering building where business moguls worked. This was where Rachel stood, feeling out of place in a sea of well-dressed professionals. She had been hired recently as an assistant to one of the wealthiest businessmen in the country, James Westbrook, a man whose name echoed through the halls of the financial world. Rachel was just getting started at her new job, but she had already noticed something strange about James Westbrook. He was kind, polite, and always had a smile for everyone. However, he kept his personal life hidden from the prying eyes of the office. Rumor had it that he had a daughter, but no one ever spoke of her. This intrigued Rachel, and as weeks went by, she found herself asking more and more questions. One day, Rachel's curiosity got the better of her. She was walking through the lobby of the building when she saw James Westbrook standing by the large glass doors, talking to a young girl. She looked around Rachel's age, maybe a little younger, and her eyes were a striking shade of green. She wore a soft pink dress and had long dark hair tied into a neat ponytail. But there was something unusual about the girl. She wasn't speaking. In fact, no one around her seemed to be talking to her. Rachel noticed a few people glance at the girl, but they quickly looked away, clearly uncomfortable. The girl smiled up at her father, but no one else acknowledged her. Rachel was confused. Why was she being ignored? This wasn't the New York City Rachel knew, where people usually couldn't help but talk to each other. A few days later, Rachel found herself in the elevator with James Westbrook and his daughter, who was once again standing silently beside him. This time there was a new woman with them, someone Rachel didn't recognize. She was talking to Mr. Westbrook, and Rachel couldn't help but overhear the conversation. "I've noticed how people treat her," the woman said, her voice low but filled with concern. "No one talks to her, not even the staff. It's like she doesn't exist in their world." James sighed, looking down at his daughter, who was silently looking out the window, completely unaware of the conversation. "It's not their fault," he said softly, almost as if talking to himself. "They don't know how to interact with her." Rachel's heart skipped a beat. She's not like everyone else," she wanted to ask, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. The tension in the elevator was palpable, and before she could say anything, the woman gave a curt nod and stepped out on the next floor. The doors slid shut, leaving Rachel standing in stunned silence. It was then that Rachel finally realized the truth. The girl, his daughter, wasn't deaf. She was mute, but what made it worse was that no one seemed to understand or care. James Westbrook's daughter had been cast aside by everyone, ignored in a world where only the loudest voices were heard. Rachel's mind raced. Why was she being ignored? Why were people so afraid to talk to her? James' daughter Lily had a kind smile, yet everyone seemed to look past her, treating her like she didn't matter. It was as though the world refused to see her. Then it happened. One fateful afternoon, while Rachel was running an errand for Mr. Westbrook, she witnessed something that would forever change her understanding of kindness and human connection. As she walked down the hallway, she saw Lily sitting on the floor in the corner, clutching a book to her chest. Rachel approached her slowly, unsure of how to break the silence between them. She was about to ask if Lily needed anything when she heard someone laughing in the background. Rachel turned, her heart sinking. A group of her colleagues were standing by the coffee machine, laughing and gossiping. Their eyes were locked on Lily, who hadn't noticed them. The whispers were quiet at first, but Rachel could hear every word. "Look at her. Poor girl," one of the women said. "Can't even speak. Probably has no friends." Another colleague chimed in. "No wonder her father keeps her hidden away. It's so embarrassing." Rachel felt her face grow hot with shame. The laughter continued, and the words stung as if they had pierced her heart. She glanced back at Lily, whose face was now hidden behind her book. It was as if she was trying to disappear from the cruel world around her. Rachel couldn't stand it. The anger and sadness surged within her as she walked toward Lily. As she did, she noticed something that made her stop in her tracks. The girl was signing with her hands. Rachel couldn't believe her eyes. The girl, who had been so silent, was speaking through her hands, communicating in a way Rachel had never seen before. Lily looked up, her face still unsure of what Rachel would think. She quickly dropped her hands to her lap, her cheeks flushing red. Rachel, however, did not look away. She smiled, her heart softening. It was in that moment that she made a decision that would change everything. She knelt down beside Lily and, without saying a word, began to sign back. The shock in Lily's eyes was unmistakable as Rachel formed the words in sign language. At first, Lily didn't understand what was happening. But then, slowly, a smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. Rachel signed again, this time saying, "Hi, I'm Rachel. What's your name?" Lily's smile grew wider, and she signed her name back. "Lily." Rachel sat down next to her, and for the first time since Rachel had started her job, she felt like she was in the right place. It wasn't just about learning sign language or feeling sorry for Lily. It was about making a connection. And that connection was the most powerful thing she had ever experienced. The moment was short, but it was enough to change everything. As Rachel helped Lily to her feet, the door to Mr. Westbrook's office opened, and he walked in, looking as surprised as Rachel had felt. But what caught Rachel's attention was the look in his eyes. The look of relief, of gratitude, of something deeper than just a father watching over his daughter. Rachel's curiosity grew even stronger. She had no idea what was happening or how this small interaction would lead to something bigger. But one thing was clear: this wasn't just about Lily being ignored anymore. Rachel knew she had to find out what was really going on. And she had to do it fast. As she walked back to her desk, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. Something big. What would happen next? Would anyone else ever learn to communicate with Lily? What else was Mr. Westbrook hiding? The answer seemed just out of reach. Before we go on, please like and subscribe. The days that followed Rachel's first interaction with Lily were filled with anticipation and worry. Rachel's mind constantly raced, filled with thoughts of Lily, her loneliness, and the hidden life she led behind her father's shadow. It had been just one small conversation, but it had changed everything. As Rachel spent more time with Lily, her curiosity grew deeper, and her resolve to uncover the truth strengthened. Rachel's connection with Lily only grew stronger over the next few weeks. They had long, meaningful conversations in sign language, and Rachel learned more about Lily's past. She had always known something was off about the way James kept his daughter at arm's length, but hearing Lily's side of the story added a layer of complexity. James, the seemingly perfect businessman, had kept Lily hidden from the world, not out of love, but out of fear. Fear of the truth being exposed. Fear of his daughter's painful past catching up with them both. One afternoon, Rachel was sitting in the staff lounge when she overheard two of her colleagues gossiping. She didn't want to eavesdrop, but their conversation was impossible to ignore. They were talking about Lily again. This time, however, their words weren't just hurtful. They were cruel. "You know, I heard she used to talk, but something happened. They say it was her mother's fault," one colleague whispered. Another chimed in. "I've heard that too. But Mr. Westbrook won't talk about it. He doesn't even let her out in public." Rachel's heart sank as she heard those words. It was clear now. There were rumors circulating. Rumors about something far worse than just Lily's muteness. It seemed like everyone had an opinion about her, but none of them knew the full story. Rachel decided it was time to confront James. She couldn't let these whispers continue without knowing the truth. But she had to tread carefully. James was a private man, and any misstep could lead to disastrous consequences, not just for her, but for Lily as well. The next day, Rachel found herself standing outside James's office, her hand shaking slightly as she knocked on the door. She had rehearsed her words in her head 1,000 times, but now that the moment was here, she felt uncertain. "Come in," James's voice called from inside. Rachel took a deep breath and walked in, trying to steady her nerves. She found James sitting behind his desk, the usual calmness in his eyes replaced by an air of quiet tension. He looked up from his work and smiled at her, but it didn't reach his eyes. He knew something was coming. "Rachel, what's on your mind?" he asked. Rachel hesitated for a moment, then decided to dive straight in. "Mr. Westbrook, I've noticed something. And I need to ask. I overheard some conversations and I just want to understand. Why does Lily stay hidden away from everyone? I know she's your daughter and I respect that. But I can't help but wonder if there's more to her situation than we see." James's expression hardened at the mention of Lily. His eyes shifted away from Rachel, his jaw tightening as he wrestled with how much to reveal. "Rachel, you've been kind to her," James said, his voice low. "You've treated her with more respect than most people have. But some things are better left unsaid." Rachel couldn't let it go. "I don't want to disrespect your privacy, but I can see how much pain Lily has been through. I think she deserves to have her voice heard. She deserves to be treated like anyone else." James stood up from his desk, walking toward the window, his back to Rachel. His shoulders slumped as if the weight of the world had settled upon them. "I've done everything I can to protect her," he said quietly. "I've kept her away from the public eye because the truth could destroy everything." Rachel felt a wave of sympathy for him, but she also knew she couldn't let him hide behind his guilt forever. "Mr. Westbrook, you're not the only one who needs protection," she said gently. "Lily needs to be heard, and she needs someone who will stand by her. I'm willing to help, but I need to know the truth. What happened to her?" James turned, his face pale, as if Rachel had uncovered a part of him he had locked away for years. "I'll tell you everything," he whispered. "But you may not like what you hear." Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, and the moment was interrupted. James immediately put on his usual composed demeanor. "Please, Rachel," he said, his voice harder now. "I'll explain everything soon, but not here. Not like this." Rachel nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of what she had just heard. She knew James was hiding something, and it was bigger than anything she could have imagined. She left the office, her mind swirling with questions, but one thing was clear. Lily's silence wasn't just a personal struggle, it was a family secret that could change everything. As she walked down the hallway, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the verge of uncovering something far more dangerous than she had ever anticipated. What had happened to Lily? What was James so afraid of? And more importantly, would Rachel be able to help Lily find her voice before it was too late? Rachel spent the following days in a whirlwind of thoughts, emotions, and unanswered questions. James had promised to tell her everything, but part of her wondered if she had pushed him too far too soon. She was becoming more entangled in this web of secrecy and guilt than she had ever intended. The next time she saw James, it was at a company event. The grand ballroom was filled with well-dressed executives and wealthy individuals, all gathered to celebrate the success of Westbrook Enterprises. Rachel had been asked to attend as James's assistant, but she couldn't focus on the speeches, the laughter, or the clinking of glasses. Her mind was consumed with one thought: Lily. James was there, of course, mingling with other guests, but Lily was nowhere to be found. It was as if she was deliberately kept away from the public eye. Rachel couldn't help but notice the absence, the way people acted as though Lily didn't exist. As the evening wore on, Rachel found herself standing by the balcony, staring out at the city below. She hadn't expected to find peace in the bustling crowd, but for a brief moment, she felt the need to step away and collect her thoughts. That's when she heard a voice behind her. "Rachel." She turned to find Lily standing there, her face serene, but her eyes filled with something Rachel had never seen before: determination. "Lily," Rachel said softly, surprised to see her here. "What are you doing out here? Shouldn't you be inside with your father?" Lily smiled gently and signed something that Rachel didn't quite catch. She motioned for Rachel to come closer, and for the first time, Rachel noticed something that made her heart race. Lily had an envelope in her hand. With a mix of curiosity and worry, Rachel approached and stood beside Lily. She watched as Lily opened the envelope and handed it to Rachel. "This is for you," Lily signed, her expression serious. Rachel hesitated before accepting the envelope. Inside she found a letter that would unravel everything. The handwriting was familiar, but the words were shocking. It was a confession, a painful revelation from James. Lily had been the target of a brutal, horrific incident when she was just a child. An accident, as James had claimed, but in reality, it was far more than that. The truth about Lily's muteness wasn't a simple medical condition. It was the result of a tragic, violent event that had been covered up for years. James had been trying to protect Lily from the shame and public scrutiny, but in doing so, he had kept her locked away in a silent prison. Rachel's hands shook as she read the letter, her heart breaking for the young girl standing beside her. Lily's past wasn't just tragic. It was a tragedy that had been buried beneath layers of lies and half-truths. But now Rachel knew the truth. She knew what James had kept hidden for so long. Rachel looked up at Lily, her eyes filled with determination. "We need to tell your story," Rachel signed back to Lily, her voice unwavering. Lily's eyes softened, and for the first time Rachel saw hope. They weren't just two people lost in silence anymore. They were a team ready to face the truth together. But the question remained, would the world accept Lily's story? And would James ever be ready to face the consequences of his actions? The truth was out, but the real battle had just begun. The soft buzz of the office lights was all that filled the silence after the exchange between Rachel, James, and Lily. It felt as though the world had stopped, holding its breath as they navigated this turbulent moment together. Rachel stood beside Lily, who was still holding her father's hand, her eyes searching his face for something she had never been able to find before: absolution. Rachel had seen many people in power, wealthy men like James Westbrook, bury their emotions under layers of control, but in that moment, James was no longer the untouchable billionaire. He was just a father, grieving for the years lost in silence. "I didn't think it would come to this," James whispered, his voice breaking. "I thought I could protect her by keeping the world at bay. But look at us now. Everything I've tried to shield her from is crashing down on us." Rachel didn't know what to say at first. She had seen so much pain in Lily's eyes, but now that they had uncovered the truth, there was a new question in the air. Was James's attempt to protect his daughter from the world, from their judgment, a blessing or a curse? Was his obsession with keeping her hidden the real reason for her suffering? It was an ethical dilemma Rachel couldn't easily answer. But she knew one thing for sure: if they wanted to make things right, they had to face the storm together. The news about Lily's past had spread like wildfire. Rachel had made the difficult decision to help her tell the truth, but now that the truth was out, it was only a matter of time before the world would turn its eyes on them. James knew they could no longer hide from it. What once seemed like a protective bubble was now a fragile shell that was on the verge of shattering. The fallout began almost immediately. The media outlets, who had long turned a blind eye to Lily's presence, suddenly seized the opportunity to exploit her story. Every major news channel had their cameras focused on the Westbrook family, and the questions came relentlessly. What happened to Lily? Why did she stop speaking? Was it true that James Westbrook had been hiding her away? The world wanted answers, and they wanted them now. Rachel was in the middle of it all, trying to navigate the pressure that was building on them from all sides. She had never imagined that something as simple as learning sign language to communicate with Lily would turn into this monumental task. But now, she was more determined than ever to help Lily find her voice, not just literally, but in the world. She had to believe that telling the truth would free Lily from the shackles of her father's protective, misguided love. Lily, who had been a symbol of quiet strength all these years, had suddenly become the face of a story no one could ignore. Rachel had arranged an interview for them, one that would allow Lily to speak for herself, to reveal her truth in a way that would silence the gossip and let the world see her as she was. But as they prepared for the interview, doubts crept in. Was Lily ready for this? Was she strong enough to face the public's invasive curiosity and judgment? That night, after a long day of planning, Rachel and Lily sat alone in Rachel's small apartment, reviewing the notes for the interview. They had already practiced signing the main points they wanted to make, but Rachel could see the hesitation in Lily's eyes. She knew that Lily had been through so much already, and the pressure was only mounting. This was no longer just about telling a story, it was about facing the world and finding the courage to speak out. "Lily," Rachel said, sitting beside her, "this isn't easy. But you're stronger than anyone knows. And you have a voice. The world needs to hear it. You've already shown so much strength by trusting me, by trusting your dad. You can do this." Lily looked at her with those wise, sad eyes that had been hidden away for so long. She signed slowly, almost as if testing the weight of her words. "I don't know if I can face them," Lily signed, her hands trembling slightly. Rachel smiled softly and took Lily's hands in her own. "You're not alone," she signed back. "You have me. You have your father. And you have the world in a way you never have before. You have the power to change the way people see you, to change the way they see everyone like you." Lily looked at her father, who was standing in the doorway. His face filled with a mixture of pride and concern. For a moment, it was as if time had slowed, and the reality of what they were about to do weighed on all of them. James had been her protector for so long, but now he had to let go. They all had to. "Dad!" Lily signed, looking at James with a quiet plea in her eyes. James stepped forward, his gaze softening as he knelt beside her. "I'm so proud of you, Lily. I've always been proud. You don't have to do this for me. But if you want to tell your story, if you want to share who you really are, I'll stand by you every step of the way." Tears welled up in Lily's eyes, and for the first time in years, she smiled without fear. The weight that had burdened her for so long seemed to lift, even if just for a moment. It was as if the chains that had kept her silent were breaking apart, one by one. The next morning they were ready. The television crew arrived early, setting up the cameras and microphones in James's sprawling penthouse. The Westbrook family, once so private, now had nowhere to hide. Rachel stood beside Lily, offering her silent support as James paced nervously in the background. He had been preparing for this moment for years, but nothing could have prepared him for how vulnerable it felt to open his family's darkest secret to the world. The interview began, and the room fell into a tense silence as the reporter, a sharp woman with a reputation for getting to the heart of every story, introduced them. "Mr. Westbrook, it's been widely reported that your daughter, Lily, has been kept out of the public eye for years. Can you tell us why?" the reporter asked, her voice both professional and probing. James shifted uncomfortably but answered, his voice steady. "Lily's condition. It's not something I've shared with the world. I thought keeping her away from the public, I would protect her from scrutiny. But now I see that it was a mistake. It was wrong." The reporter nodded, her eyes narrowing slightly as she turned to Lily. "Lily, you've been silent for most of your life. What made you decide to finally speak out?" Rachel held her breath as Lily signed, her hands moving slowly but with a newfound confidence. "I wasn't silent because I wanted to be. I was silent because I had to be. People, they didn't know how to talk to me. They didn't know how to listen." The room was silent for a moment as everyone took in her words. For the first time in her life, Lily was not just speaking for herself through her hands. She was speaking for all those who had been silenced by prejudice, ignorance, and fear. The reporter's eyes softened. "What would you like the world to know about you?" Lily looked at Rachel, then at her father, and then back at the camera. She signed once more, each word carrying the weight of a lifetime. "I am not my silence. I am not my father's shame. I am me." The words hung in the air, and the world held its breath. Rachel could feel the shift. The silence that had once surrounded Lily was gone, replaced by something more powerful than anyone had anticipated. Her truth. The interview continued, but Rachel could see that things were changing. The world was beginning to understand Lily, beginning to see her for who she really was. The public's view of the Westbrook family was forever altered, not by the scandal, but by Lily's strength and resilience. And, for the first time in years, James Westbrook didn't feel like a prisoner of his own mistakes. He was free, and so was his daughter. But as the interview wrapped up and the cameras began to pack away, a new wave of questions emerged. What would the public think? Would they be able to accept the truth? Or would the darkness of Lily's past continue to haunt them? Just as Rachel was about to leave, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her colleague in the press office. The story was already going viral. But the message wasn't just about the interview. There was another piece to the puzzle, a revelation about Lily's past that no one had expected. A secret that James had kept hidden even from Rachel. Something that could change everything. And as Rachel read the message, her heart skipped a beat. The world outside the Westbrook penthouse was still reeling from the powerful interview that had aired just hours before. Lily's voice, once silenced, had been heard by millions. The backlash, as expected, was intense. But amidst the scrutiny, a strange feeling had settled over Rachel. She felt a mix of pride and fear, as if the storm had just begun. It had only been a few hours since the interview, but already the media had exploded. The headlines were everywhere. Billionaire's deaf daughter speaks out for the first time, Westbrook family's darkest secret revealed, a father's guilt and a daughter's silent battle. The public was both stunned and sympathetic, but Rachel knew there was more to this story, more that neither she nor Lily were prepared for. As the night drew on, Rachel's phone buzzed with messages from her colleagues. The world was talking about Lily, but it wasn't just about her newfound voice. There was something else, something that threatened to destroy everything. Rachel glanced at the phone screen. The message was brief, but it was enough to make her blood run cold. A link to a news article, a brief headline. Lily's past exposed. A hidden scandal tied to the Westbrook family. Her hands shook as she clicked the link. The article was written by an anonymous source, and it claimed to have uncovered a piece of Lily's past that neither James nor Rachel had known about. It wasn't about the muteness, the traumatic incident that had caused it, or the public's reaction to it. No, this was about something much darker. Something that had been buried deep. So deep that even James, with all his wealth and power, had never been able to uncover it. Rachel's eyes widened as she read the details. The article revealed that Lily had been the victim of a violent crime years ago, but the perpetrator wasn't a stranger. It was someone from within the Westbrook family. A relative, a trusted figure who had been close to them for years. The report described how James had kept the truth hidden, not just to protect Lily from the public eye, but to shield the family's reputation. He had known about the crime, but he had done everything in his power to suppress the details, to make sure no one ever found out. But now it was all out in the open. Rachel felt her stomach drop. She had always known that James was hiding something, but this was worse than anything she could have imagined. She quickly scanned the article again, trying to make sense of the chaos. It described how Lily's trauma had been used against her, manipulated to keep her silent. It spoke of how the crime had been covered up, and how Lily had suffered in silence, not only because of her muteness but because of the betrayal from someone she had trusted. Rachel's head spun. She needed to talk to James. But where was he? She picked up her phone to call him, but before she could dial, she heard a knock at the door. It was soft but deliberate. Her heart skipped a beat. She wasn't expecting anyone. She opened the door to find James standing there, his face pale and tight with worry. His eyes were filled with a mixture of shame and fear, the kind of fear Rachel hadn't seen in him before. He was usually composed, but now he seemed broken. "Rachel," he began, his voice trembling slightly. I know what you've seen. It's true. Everything they said, it's true. And I can't keep hiding from it anymore." Rachel's throat tightened. She didn't know how to respond. Everything she had believed about James, about his protection of Lily, suddenly felt like a lie. "James, what is this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why didn't you tell me?" James stepped inside the apartment, closing the door behind him. He took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts before speaking. "When Lily was a child," he began, his voice breaking, "she was hurt by someone close to the family. It wasn't just an accident. It was something deliberate. I couldn't let her go through the trauma of facing that person in public. I couldn't risk losing her completely." Rachel's eyes widened as she pieced together the information. "You mean?" "Yes," James whispered. "It was my brother, Mark. He took advantage of her. And when she finally tried to speak out, he threatened to ruin her, to destroy our entire family's reputation. I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't let the world see what had really happened. So I kept her quiet, kept her hidden. I thought I was protecting her, but I was only hurting her more. Rachel felt sick. The weight of James's confession crashed down on her like a tidal wave. She had suspected something was wrong, but this was beyond anything she could have imagined. I never wanted her to suffer like this, James continued, his voice shaking. But I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to make it right. So I kept her in the shadows, thinking if I could protect her from the world, I could protect her from the pain. But I was wrong. Rachel sat down on the couch, trying to process everything. She had always known that James was protecting Lily, but she had never understood the depth of his guilt and the dark secret he had been hiding. Now everything had changed. Lily's silence wasn't just a result of the world's ignorance. It was a consequence of the betrayal she had suffered at the hands of someone she had trusted. But Rachel knew that this couldn't be the end of the story. Lily had found her voice, and now it was time to make sure the truth was heard. Not just about Lily's silence, but about the crime that had been buried for so long. We need to go public with this, Rachel said, her voice firm. The world needs to know what really happened. We can't let this secret fester anymore. We need to tell Lily's story, all of it. James hesitated. His eyes filled with conflict. Do you really think she's ready for that? He asked softly. She's stronger than you think, Rachel replied, her gaze steady. She's already spoken her truth. Now it's time for the world to hear it. James took a deep breath. His eyes filled with both fear and relief. I've spent so many years hiding this. I don't know if I can do it. But for her, for Lily, I'll do whatever it takes. Rachel nodded, feeling a sense of resolve settle within her. She wasn't just an assistant anymore. She wasn't just a bystander in this family's drama. She was part of the story now. She had made a promise to Lily, and she would see it through. The next few days were a blur of interviews, phone calls, and legal consultations. The truth, once buried so deep, was now being laid bare for everyone to see. The media storm that had followed Lily's first interview intensified as more and more details about the crime came to light. Mark Westbrook, James's brother, was arrested, and the public's response was one of shock and outrage. As the dust began to settle, Rachel and Lily stood together, side by side, ready to face whatever came next. James, once a figure of untouchable power, had been humbled by the truth. But for Lily, the truth was her liberation. She had fought for her silence to be broken, and now her voice was ringing out louder than ever. And though the road ahead would be long, filled with the challenges of rebuilding their lives and reputations, Rachel knew one thing for certain. Lily had found her place in the world. The world could no longer ignore her.